The Xarnathi Empire had never lost a planetary conquest. Their warships could melt continents. Their orbital cannons erased cities before the defenders even realized what hit them. When Earth resisted annexation, the Empire barely blinked. Another minor species clinging to its primitive world, an annoyance, not a threat. The suppression fleet arrived with the usual protocol: establish orbital dominance, neutralize communication relays, and deploy shock infantry to key population centers. As expected, Earth's satellites went dark in the first strike. A few token missiles fired upward were intercepted with contemptuous ease. Within hours, the skies above Earth were owned by the Empire. Xarnathi tacticians had reviewed preliminary scans. No spacefaring fleet, no planetary shields, no evidence of a unified world government. Human technology appeared fractured, outdated. They saw wheels and treads, combustion engines, analog guns, laughable, obsolete things. They didn't even use hover tanks. The idea that this species posed a real threat was absurd. Troop carriers descended into the atmosphere, carrying elite biomech infantry and armored walkers. The cities London, Shanghai, Chicago, Johannesburg were prioritized. On paper, it was over already. But the ground told another story. Within minutes of deployment, reports of heavy losses poured in. Not from orbital strikes, from ground fire, tank fire. At first, the Xarnathi commanders thought it was a mistake. How could so many elite units be wiped out by treaded relics? But the evidence was indisputable. Entire strike teams disappeared in alleyways. Walkers were split open like tin cans by rounds that punched through their shielded cores. Urban blocks lit up with coordinated fire, not from stationary cannons, but from highly mobile, heavily armored tanks. A unit in New Delhi reported being lured into a destroyed highway, only to be surrounded by tanks hidden beneath collapsed structures. They never made it out. In Berlin, a dozen armored walkers were destroyed in 60 seconds by human tank units that used smoke screens, bait drones, and vertical ambushes from subterranean lifts. For the first time in Xarnathi history, drop commanders requested permission to retreat from a primitive species. High Command denied the request and instead ordered more aggressive force. The fleet's generals were baffled. This wasn't just stubborn resistance, it was effective resistance. Tank battalions moved like hunting packs, never staying in the same place. Their coordination was flawless. No centralized command could be detected, but each tank crew acted with precision and autonomy. They were reading Empire tactics, predicting drops, and countering them almost instantly. Xarnathi air units began targeting known tank positions, but by the time they arrived, the humans were gone. Worse, decoys and active jamming misled targeting systems, leading to friendly fire and wasted munitions. Aerial scans showed odd thermal patterns across Earth's surface, too regular to be natural. Analysts realized these were underground corridors, heat-shielded bunkers, and mobile armories. Humans weren't just hiding tanks. They had built the planet to protect them. Their cities were traps. Their roads were battlegrounds. Their forests, graveyards. A veteran Xarnathi ground officer sent one final transmission before his unit vanished beneath the Amazon canopy. They don't fear us. These tanks, they hunt us. At Fleet Command, silence reigned. No one had anticipated this. The humans hadn't tried to match the Empire's space technology. They'd fortified their soil, weaponized their terrain, and adapted ancient machines into beasts of war that defied every expectation. The invasion was supposed to be over in 3 days. It was only day 2. They studied the wreckage in disbelief. Xarnathi engineers, floating above the remains of a disabled human tank, couldn't understand how such a crude design had dismantled 3 walkers before dying. It had no shielding, no repulsors, no nanoweave armor. But it had survived 8 direct hits before returning fire with a solid metal slug that cored an elite assault unit through its cockpit. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't advanced. It just worked brutally well. The Empire's analysts convened in orbit. They expected a simple sweep and cleanse. Now, they were facing attrition rates that rivaled their worst historical conflicts. They dug deeper into human military patterns, and what they found disturbed them. Earth had not invested in space fleets. It had not chased interstellar ambitions. Instead, it had perfected ground warfare over centuries of internal conflict. Every major nation had developed tanks, not just machines but doctrines. Urban tanks, forest tanks, mountain tanks, autonomous tanks, even amphibious assault variants. Humanity had spent generations mastering the battlefield the Xarnathi considered obsolete. Worse still, the tanks weren't just machines. They were modular systems built for resilience. Armor plating could be swapped in the field. Tracks could be replaced in minutes. Ammunition was 3D, printed or machined on-site in mobile workshops. Command wasn't centralized, it was distributed. If one tank lost contact, it acted independently, using onboard AI trained on decades of simulated warfare and real combat data. They didn't need orders. They needed only a target. Even more troubling, the tanks communicated through encrypted, narrow-beam, line-of-sight signals, often bouncing messages off the environment. Terrain itself was their comms array. The Xarnathi's advanced electronic warfare suites were almost useless. Nothing to intercept, nothing to jam. In North America, a pattern emerged. Tank formations intentionally exposed a vulnerable flank, drawing Xarnathi forces into ambushes lined with buried railgun emplacements. When the invaders tried to retreat, the roads collapsed beneath them. Pre-charged demolition lines triggered remotely. The entire battlefield was a layered trap. Tactics developed in Earth's world wars had been refined into a science. They observed one formation using ghost runs, one real tank, followed by 3 decoys emitting identical signatures, luring in airstrikes while the actual units circled behind. Another team disabled a walker's targeting system by flooding its sensors with microwave bursts from jury-rigged towers made of scrap metal and antenna arrays. Low-tech solutions that delivered high-tech destruction. Empire strategists proposed carpet bombing the regions with heavy plasma saturation. But they couldn't. Human forces had embedded near civilian populations, hospitals, power plants, locations the Empire's code of conquest forbade from being destroyed without provocation. And yet, human tank crews made sure their presence near those areas was known, constantly broadcasting humanitarian efforts alongside combat kills. They were daring the Xarnathi to violate their own laws. On every continent, tanks emerged from unexpected places, shipping yards, under football stadiums, inside collapsed subways, even launched from cargo ships retrofitted as floating deployment bays. Tanks were no longer vehicles. They were an ecosystem. The longer the invasion dragged on, the more it became clear. This wasn't desperation. It was strategy. Humans had never intended to match the Empire's ship for ship. They knew their skies would fall, so they fortified the ground beneath, creating a planet-sized kill zone that punished every step forward. Every advance was bait. Every retreat, a feint. In Africa, a mobile tank battalion known only by the Xarnathi as Black Mambas cut through 3 armored divisions and disappeared into the desert. When scout drones followed, they found only heat mirages and misleading tracks. The desert itself had become part of the weapon. Dust storms camouflaged railgun barrels. Mirage fields hid supply trains. The humans had become predators in their own terrain. The final blow to the Xarnathi's pride came when a captured tank was analyzed aboard a research frigate. Inside was not a state-of-the-art AI or complex interface, but 3 human crew members operating with muscle memory, handwritten calculations, and voice commands. No network links, no vulnerabilities, just training, trust, and grit. They weren't fighting machines. They were fighting willpower forged in steel. Commanders across the Empire's fleet began submitting casualty reports not seen since the ancient civil wars. Ground operations had stalled. Reinforcements no longer guaranteed success. Every new deployment required twice the planning time and still resulted in losses. What began as a planetary police action had become a war of attrition. The High Command grew uneasy. They dispatched elite strategists from the core systems, veterans of over 50 campaigns, to bring order. Upon arrival, they found chaos. Supply lines were compromised. Forward bases were harassed constantly by mobile tank units that struck in the night and vanished by dawn. Even temporary command centers weren't safe. Tanks had begun targeting logistical points, ammunition dumps, power generators, medical outposts, with surgical precision. One by one, officers began reporting a demoralizing shift in the battlefield dynamic. Xarnathi soldiers, cloned for obedience, bred for combat, were hesitating, not from fear of death, but from uncertainty. The terrain was no longer theirs. Every forest was suspect, every hill potentially hiding cannon barrels. Veteran squads deployed with air cover were now requesting additional reconnaissance before moving a single step forward. Delay, indecision, doubt, all new to an empire that thrived on rapid, overwhelming force. Attempts to flood zones with mechs and drones backfired. Human electromagnetic pulses, often disguised as civilian broadcasts, scrambled AI protocols mid-battle. Some drones turned on their own, others froze in place. A single farming community in Eastern Europe managed to disable an entire drone swarm with nothing but hacked weather towers and a modified tractor. Humanity's resourcefulness baffled the strategists. Where was this innovation coming from? The answer was worse than expected. Everywhere. There was no centralized weapons lab, no singular command genius behind it all. Civilians, engineers, ex-soldiers, programmers, even school teachers. Earth's population had gone to war collectively. Any place that could fabricate parts was repurposed. Highways became armor lanes. Factories turned to war foundries. The distinction between soldier and civilian blurred. Empire psyops tried breaking resistance with orbital shows of force. Cities were illuminated by low-orbit plasma burns meant to terrify, not kill. But instead of panic, they saw tanks emerge from underground shelters minutes later, coated in soot, ready to fight. Broadcasts intercepted from human radio channels didn't speak of fear, but defiance. They made jokes about the Empire's aim. They named their tanks after ancient gods and childhood pets. They painted kill counts like trophies. These weren't just machines. They were symbols. High Command approved the use of psychological warfare, spreading propaganda to suggest Earth had already surrendered. The humans responded by intercepting the transmissions and remixing them into music, broadcasting them back with added commentary. They weren't just surviving, they were mocking the invaders. A captured human pilot revealed little under interrogation. He simply said, "You've taken planets. We've survived extinction. There's a difference." In a particularly brutal confrontation in South America, an entire armored Xarnathi convoy was stopped by a single human tank platoon. Surveillance showed the platoon using improvised bridges, thermal camouflage, and misdirection tactics to divide and isolate the convoy. Each walker was picked off individually, ambushed from multiple angles with precise, synchronized strikes. Even after air support arrived, the human units had vanished. All that remained was a scorched message burned into the soil. You still have to touch the ground. Xarnathi scholars began issuing quiet warnings to their own leadership. The humans weren't technologically superior. They were strategically incompatible. The Empire's doctrine, rooted in linear conquest and spaceborne supremacy, had no countermeasure for a war waged in shadows, ruins, and mud. The realization spread through command channels like a virus. Earth could not be subdued without rewriting the rules of engagement. And the moment they rewrote those rules, the Empire would be forced to become something it had not been in 1,000 years. Vulnerable. Still, orders came from above. No retreat. No compromise. Crush the resistance, whatever the cost. And so, the final assault was prepared. The Empire's largest ground deployment since the pacification of the 12 Moons. Thousands of units. Orbital fire support. Reinforced walkers. Advanced shield mechs. A show of absolute force. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that humanity had been waiting for exactly this. The Empire's final assault landed with calculated brutality. Entire continents lit with coordinated strikes. From orbit, the Xarnathi launched kinetic rods to punch craters into human defenses. Waves of drop carriers deployed, reinforced mechanized legions supported by swarms of drones. It was a display meant to break Earth's spine in one strike. Every doctrine of overwhelming dominance was brought to bear, and still, tanks rolled out to meet them. Human armored divisions emerged from ash and rubble, decades-old hulls moving beside fresh forged prototypes. They moved without panic, without pause. Railguns roared. Plasma shells detonated mid-flight from onboard interceptors. Old units with scratch paint and patched armor held formation beside bleeding-edge models too new to have names. This wasn't a defense. It was an answer. The lead wave of Xarnathi walkers advanced through scorched fields outside what was once a major industrial hub. They met silence, then thunder. From the tree-line, from the craters, from beneath their own path, tanks erupted in synchronized volleys. Within minutes, the front line of mechs collapsed, shields overloaded, legs sheared by kinetic rounds traveling at hypersonic velocity. Reinforcements advanced and fell just as fast. For every tank the Empire destroyed, 2 more appeared. Mobile fabrication units churned out replacement parts in real time. Wounded machines dragged themselves to repair hubs and returned to battle within hours. Drone footage showed tanks fighting while still ablaze, crews refusing to evacuate until ammunition ran dry. Human AI co-pilots ignored damage warnings, prioritizing enemy kills over self-preservation. This was not logic. It was resolve encoded into metal. The Empire responded with orbital reinforcements, but human tech teams, civilians, hackers, rogue coders, unleashed cyber attacks that paralyzed fleet targeting. Navigation systems failed. Support drops landed miles off target. Some warships even turned on each other, misreading IFF signals corrupted by local jammers. From the ground, humanity disrupted a fleet of gods. Then came the final blow. Project Black Iron was no myth. It had been whispered in intercepted communications, dismissed as propaganda. But when the black tanks arrived, the Empire felt fear. Coated in thermal-absorbent alloy, powered by microfusion cores, these monsters moved like predators, immune to EMP, shrugging off plasma, shrugging off heat, shrugging off everything. One by one, they punched holes through the enemy formation, carving paths through steel and flame, unstoppable. Xarnathi Command tried to pull back, but retreat paths were already compromised. Human units had looped behind their advance during the chaos. Roads collapsed. Bridges detonated. Escape was a maze, and every wrong turn led into the jaws of armored fury. Above, the Empire's flagship began receiving false critical alerts. Its internal systems were being overwritten. Somewhere on the surface, human specialists had accessed their fleet protocols. Drones launched from the planet, cloaked and autonomous, swarmed the command decks. The ship's captain issued a full retreat. What remained of the Empire's ground force was left behind, surrounded, cut off. No reinforcements, no rescue, just the roar of tank engines closing in from all sides. And then silence. The battle was over. Earth stood. The land burned, the skies blackened, but the people endured. Where cities had crumbled, foundries rose. Where tanks had fallen, new ones rolled in their place. The Empire, which had conquered 1,000 worlds, had broken itself against a single one. Humanity didn't win because they had superior firepower. They won because they refused to lose. Every tank was a testament to stubbornness. Every shell a message carved in steel. You will not break us. In the aftermath, across the galaxy, whispers grew. Species long oppressed by the Xarnathi began to stir. They spoke of Earth, of its strange warriors who wore no powered armor and drove death machines on treads. They spoke of victory from the mud, of resistance without mercy. Humanity began receiving strange transmissions, not threats but requests, designs, blueprints, alliances. A new symbol appeared on rebel banners, a tank silhouette under a black star. Because now, when the stars speak of war, they speak of the planet that fought gods with engines and won.